Very good evening, morning, and afternoon to all who have joined us today. I'm Ankit, and I have recently joined the ProApp team as the business developer. So I thought I would love to know our learners better. So that's the reason I took upon this opportunity to host this wonderful session. And we have our guest for today. Her name is Menaka Chandrasekhar. So Menaka has over 9 years of design experience spanning across Singapore and India. With a strong background in graphic design, she has a unique skill set of designing for print and digital media. So her love for problem solving and pixel perfection eventually led her to becoming a user experience designer. She presently leads the home seeker experience across web and app platforms for PropertyGuru Group, a real estate marketplace for Southeast Asia. And being said that, the stage is all yours, Mentor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I definitely look forward to questions. Make this as interesting as possible because the topic I'm here to talk about is something I believe everyone should be passionate about, considering you want a career in design. With that, let me kick off. Just a second. All right, great. Okay. So as Ankit mentioned, very briefly about me, I am leading the product design experience for property seekers in for PropertyGuru, and the company as such is headquartered in Singapore, but we're across multiple markets in Southeast Asia like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and also Vietnam. Yeah, so my team is a fairly mid-sized team that I work with. Yeah, so I mean the design team, the org as such is much bigger. But anyway, that's a little background about me. So let me start off with some numbers. Yeah, so this is a graph that shows what 100 years of UX looks like. And if you look very carefully, we began in the 1950s, and every 30 years or so, there is a jump in the number of designers entering the industry, right? So what was very interesting is by 2050, roughly there will be 100 million UX professionals globally, right? What that means is roughly 1% of the world's population will be designing, and the rest of them will be building, selling, servicing the things that we design. So it's quite a staggering number to imagine there'll be 1 billion of us in the future. 1 million of us in the future, but keep that in mind as I talk through some of the tips on how to become a good UX designer today. With that, the topics that I'll be talking about today are related to these three things: UX levels and career paths, design competencies and skills, and best practices for a job-ready portfolio. Okay, let's dive in. So I'm going, before we get into the whole, if it still doesn't work.
I was at Apple, and we said the experience of using these computers is weak. The experience, when you first discover it, when you see it in the store, when you buy it, when you, can't fit it into the car. It's in this great big box. It doesn't fit into the car. And when you finally do get it home, opening the box up and, it looks scary. I don't know if I dare put this computer together. All of that is user experience. It's everything that touches upon your experience with the product, and it may not even be near the product. It may be when you're telling somebody else about it. That's what we meant when we devised the term user experience and set up what we called the User Experience Architect's Office at Apple to try to enhance things. Now, Apple was already pretty good, so we were starting with a good product, making it even better. Today, that term has been horribly misused. It's used by people to say, I'm a user experience designer. I design websites or I design apps. And they have no clues to what they're doing. And they think the experience is that simple device, the website or the app or who knows what. No, it's everything. It's the way you experience the world. It's the way you experience your life. It's the way you experience the service. Or, an app or a computer system. But it's a system, it's everything. Got it?
All right, yeah. So I think, keep going. Yeah, so what what Don Norman really talks about is two things. He's talking about how the experience is not just one touch point, not one device or not one thing, but it's a series of things. Where I wanted to go with this is talk about the relationship between UX and CX, or talk about the difference rather. So user experience, I think we've all heard the term before, and it's talking about the experience of one particular touch point perhaps, or like a bunch of touch points, whereas a customer experience is that interaction that happens with you and that touch point over and over again and over a period of time, right? That is the customer experience. Keep this in mind as we go along, because what's also important to know or take note of is there are different levels to UX itself, or different depths. So at a very basic level is interaction level, which most designers are very, very familiar with. You're doing visual design, you're designing a quick kind of interaction on a page. Next level from that is a journey level, where again, it's a series of steps that you take. There's a series of actions that you have to think about. And lastly is the relationship level, which I touched upon just now, which is the CX. Let me make this a bit more concrete with an example. So at the interaction level, as I said, let's take an example of someone trying to submit a claim for insurance. So if they're doing that on one single device, let's say on laptop, and the series of actions that they need to do, or that particular task that they need to do, this is at an interaction level. And what is also important to note is the focus there is on designing for specific guidelines for that particular device, for that particular touch point. And there might be specific patterns that you should keep in mind as you're designing at an interaction level. So you're basically making it the best experience for that screen for that moment in time. But the next level from there is a journey level. Now, this captures the person's experience as they are trying to accomplish the bigger goal, which is I want to claim submit my claim and get my money, right? So while the interaction is submitting a claim, the biggest goal that the user has is I want to get paid, because I have been regular on my part paying the insurance, and I know the terms, so I want to get what I'm owed. So again, in this case, the design here should think about the cohesiveness of the journey as a whole, because as a designer, while we are all mostly focusing at the interaction level, I think super important to take note that one level above from that is the journey of the user. And that can often break down if one point in your journey also fails. I'm sure we've all ordered something online, and if the delivery person doesn't get there on time and you don't know when your order is going to arrive, that creates anxiety and panic in your mind. And solving for that is also very much a designer's job. It's part of the user experience. Lastly, you have the relationship level, which is referring to all the interactions that a person may have. So in this example here, they're purchasing a policy. So right from seeing an ad for insurance to looking up the plans online, receiving a brochure. Maybe the second part of the journey is like signing up or filing a claim. Maybe after this, you decided to go ahead and buy the insurance. Some point in time, you may have to file a claim. And then lastly, you need to renew the policy. So all these different journeys over time, that adds up to the life cycle with the customer, for the company, for the brand. And that cumulative kind of impression that the brand makes on the customer, that is the third level of UX. So yeah, so how does this relate to your job career? I'm gonna demystify that in a second, but before I get into that, I hope everyone here is familiar with the design thinking process. You can answer in the chat. I'm looking. Yes. Aishwarya is familiar, so is Karthik. Okay, cool. I guess most of us are familiar, but just to reiterate, the empathize is basically referring to the research part of it, or maybe you're kind of trying to get into the head of your users. Define here refers to defining the problem, or what is it that you're trying to solve for? What are the users' problems, or what is the business problem? Ideate is the part where we are all most excited by, because you're throwing ideas out there and seeing what happens. Can we get everyone to look at the same idea, right? That is probably the most challenging part for a designer. Then we come to the prototype and the testing part, which is where the researchers also play a big role. Yeah, so overall, this process is called the design thinking process. Okay. All right, so one of the most common roles out there is the UX designer role. It's known by many names: interaction designer, UI, UX designer, experience designer, product designer. There are many ways to describe a UX, what a UX designer does, because this terminology, as you saw, was all encompassing. Primarily, for most UX roles, they are a generalist, which means that they are partaking in all the way from empathy all the way to testing and everything in between, right? So they are across all the spectrum of design thinking process. And then their main role also typically will have a business side to it. There's an impact that the business wants to make. So there's a monetary goal often, or like clicks or something that the business wants to achieve. And on the other side of the spectrum is the user problem, or what the users want who kind of use that service. And the job of the UX designer in this case is to balance both things. Some skills that are, again, amongst all the skills, what I've listed out here are very small list of skills, but essentially all of these skills are what would be expected from a UX designer. And some examples of what are they responsible for, right? In some small companies, if they don't have a researcher, dedicated researcher, then the product designer or UX designer also does research. They create personas, journey maps. All of these are like design outcomes that the UX designer is responsible for. Next, we have UX researchers. And if you notice, I'm going from a very common role to a niche role. So that's how I've structured my slides today. But essentially, for a researcher, there's empathy and defining the problem are kind of the main areas of focus for them. They're also often involved maybe in testing, because they need to show the product to the user, find out where things are working, not working. Yeah, so basically these three parts of the design process is what researchers focus on. And they do qualitative and quantitative research, which refers to, well, qualitative here refers to going in depth with the questions. You have user interviews and different research methodologies to ask users questions directly, whereas quantitative is often just a survey. It's like more in numbers rather than getting a deeper understanding of what the users want. Sometimes it can be a mix. But yeah, generally that's what they do. And what are they responsible for is making sure that the business is taking the right decisions based on the value of things according to user research. Maybe things is not the right word here. It's value of the ideas, right? So ultimately, what they skills that they need to be good at are like listening skills, storytelling, putting people at ease, number crunching. Surprisingly, research involves a lot of data processing and understanding numbers and organizing information at a whole different level. So yeah, some of these are the deliverables for a researcher. Yeah, moving on really quickly, then you have UI designers. Again, there is different understanding of the word UI out there. When I talk about UI design, I am referring to somebody who's focusing on visual design or design systems. Primarily, that person focuses on pixel perfect design and prototyping, and they care about the feeling of the product as much as the look and feel, as in just visually. It's also what feeling do they want the user to have, right? What feelings to evoke in the experience. So that's where they primarily focus, and they are often detail oriented, and they must have a strong aesthetic sense for colors, typography. Not saying that everyone has it always. Sometimes you can train your eyes and your mind to pick up on these cues. But yeah, generally, if you want to focus on UI design as a career, then these are kind of some of the skill sets that you may need. Some deliverables are mentioned here. Particularly, I think design libraries is something that I think all UI designers would be most excited to build, because it's like building a system out of nothing, and then making others go fast in the company because you've built that system really well. That's kind of where the challenge lies for a UI designer. Next, we have UX writer. Some companies, they call it copywriters, but copywriting is a general term, not to be confused with like marketing function. But again, it depends on the company and what kind of roles they define internally. Sometimes they also call a content strategist. So essentially, they focus on the experience and the words that they use in the experience that will help the user along in the journey. I guess at the interaction level that I mentioned earlier, and also the relationship level, this is where the UX writer can actually play a very important role. And sometimes, like I mentioned, they also overlap with the marketing function in the team. Yeah. Next, the last role, which I wanted to talk about very quickly, again, probably a niche role, is UX strategist. Not all companies may have them as a strategic role. Maybe they are called principal designers, or sometimes it's your design manager who also does the strategy in the company. It really depends on how the organization is structured. But essentially, someone who is a UX strategist is more concerned with that big picture thinking about the journeys and also like relationships, as I mentioned. Is everything set up for building that good relationship over time? Do you have a good process for building product? That's very much one of the things that somebody in UX strategy would focus on. And they can be managers or individual contributors, as I mentioned. Depends entirely on the org structure here. And yeah, what would they focus on is like setting the vision or strategy for what the team should focus on, what the company should focus on. Sometimes they work with product managers very, very closely to ensure that the roadmap is sort of laid out very well. And they also train designers in their team on what should be next. Yeah. So these 5 are at a very high level, some roles that are out there for UX designers. Next, I'll talk about, so what will it take to stand out from the crowd? Why did I put this sentence? As I mentioned, 100 million in 2050. That's going to be quite a lot of designers to compete against. So what skills do you need, or what skills I think you should focus on are craft, mindset, and collaboration, right? So getting the work done. Mindset here, I'm talking about how should you improve the way you think. And then lastly, it's like, how do you work with others? How well do you work with others? So for crafts, specifically, I have listed out these are the most important skill sets to build. Now, when you're just starting your career, maybe you can't be good at all of it. So the advice I have is to pick and choose. I'll share a little example of how I began, right? So I studied graphic design. So I come from a visual design sort of background. So I kind of had the first row here of skill sets when I graduated from college. But what I didn't know are probably research methods, or platform knowledge was not that strong about every single platform to design for, because primarily I focus on print design. So how did I develop those skills over time is basically focusing on learning one thing at a time according to the job path that I'm taking as well. So when I decided to make the transition into digital design, the first thing I focused on is understanding what are some best practices for that medium. Okay, so I'm going to design websites. Now, what should I know about building websites? What are some things like responsive design guidelines? Then when I had to design for mobile apps, then what are the guidelines from Apple, Android? So those kind of things are learned knowledge or learned skills over time, but there might be some that you may want to pick up like right at the start. Next, I'll talk about the mindset skills. So for me, the most important skills are these four. So what do I mean by growth oriented is, as a designer, it's important to have a kind of a open mind when it comes to taking feedback, and you kind of have to build almost a thick skin, because when you work in a company where there's multiple opinions on the design, or you work for a client, right? In both cases, there will be feedback from different angles, and it's kind of your job to process that feedback and not take it to heart that it kind of derails you from proceeding with creating the thing that you're supposed to. So having a bit of resilience, putting your own biases aside, maybe you have a bias towards a particular person, all of that, you got to get past that in order to be a really good designer. And then the second one, I think for me is a very important one as well, like comfort with ambiguity. What I mean by that is, let's say the roadmap, or you're working in a startup where you don't really know if there's a good product market fit. So what happens there is people keep trying different experiments, things keep changing. Sometimes it can be frustrating if things change too fast, but some level of comfort of the unknown is a given with any designer, because when you start your design process, when you empathize, you don't always know if that's the right level of empathy you have for your users as well. So somewhere along the way, things might change. So it's important to be comfortable with that. And the last two are more on, again, what I have personally practiced. So that's why I put it down here. Making sure that you're brave, asking stupid questions in a room. Don't worry about it sounding stupid or you looking stupid. I think it's important to share your feelings or your thoughts, and not be afraid of the consequence. Most of the time it's important. It also helps other people in the room realize that, okay, you're not just here to do as they say, you have your own opinions on stuff. That's super important, especially when you work, I guess, as a product designer. These last two things will really resonate. Last one is collaboration. Again, if you work in a startup or in a company where you work with engineers and cross-functional teams, basically, I think that's super important. Having the power to influence and negotiate. You should know who to talk to, when to talk to them to kind of get the project moving. Making sure you can present your work really well, articulate your design decisions really well, and make sure you document things, whether it's receiving feedback or anything else. That's super important as well. And then lastly, some level of project management skills is good to have for every designer, ensuring that things get delivered on time and there's some level of control and quality that you maintain. Yeah. So things to ask yourself. This is again at another level, which is your career level. What is important to you? Where do you want to focus? Where do you want to go next? And how do you assess yourself? The questions I ask myself is, how important is that skill to me? Where do I want it to be? Is it at the right level? Like I mentioned, when I began as a graphic designer, I always had this kind of an imposter syndrome jumping into the industry. So I think at some point I decided, okay, I really want to understand front end, very well. So I decided to pursue a short course, just to understand how websites are coded. So that was only possible when I had to reflect on my own skill set, right? So I think often we get so focused on just applying for jobs and building our portfolio that we don't take a step back and kind of ask ourselves, where do we want to go next? So a framework that I kind of borrowed and developed, I'm going to show it to you in a minute. Essentially, it's kind of a skills framework. And how you can use this is when, so you can map out, so there's different kinds of, swim lanes for each design skill. This is particularly for product design. I believe you can develop your own for different types of roles, but in general, I think it encompasses all sorts of aspects of product design. And again, how to read this ring is from inside to out. You have the novice level and the beginner level, intermediate, advanced. So there's like a little definition over here on the side that you can read later. The idea is to ask yourself, how good am I at UX writing? Do I think I'm at a beginner level? Then, okay, plot that out for yourself. And then over time, once you start plotting this, I recommend doing this like maybe once or twice a year. Maybe when you write your goals for the year or something, like your mid-year check-in with your manager, you can start to use this framework to map for yourself, how are you growing and where are your gaps? Because unless you do an assessment, and what we used to do in my company is also have the designer plot this graph, and then the manager does the same plotting for that designer, right? And then you can compare the two and see if, are you actually underrating yourself or overrating yourself? Then you and your manager can have a shared understanding of like, am I at the right skill level? Because this can be a interesting topic to bring up when you're trying to also like talk about growing in your career, and depending on the company you work at and how they define career laddering. So this can be a useful framework for kind of mapping that out for yourself. So I'll share this link. Please take a screenshot for yourself. You can totally access this Miro board. Unfortunately, it's on a free plan, so all you can do is screenshot it and map it out for yourself. But feel free to take a deep look. Yeah, I'm gonna move on really quickly. Yeah, and then lastly, what else can you do to improve? You can reach out to design mentors, get an evaluation of your work. I believe most of people who join this field and start out, this is what most of them do. Another advice I have is to also, if you're working already, don't think that I have a job today and don't neglect your portfolio. Do keep improving it on the side, as in when you do work that is exciting that you want to feature in your portfolio, have it in there. And then stay up to date on design best practices, and read the news if you don't do this already, and learn new skills. Like I mentioned, I picked up front-end development just because it's an adjacency to what I was already doing. Similarly, maybe there are UX writing courses or something else adjacent to what you want to pursue that you can also keep learning. Lastly, I'll leave you with some best practices for a job-ready portfolio. First tip I have for you is making sure the portfolio is designed or dressed up as per the job that you want, right? Always work, instead of, I want to make a case study, ask yourself, what kind of job do I want? A very simple exercise you can do is think about what companies are most exciting for you from the UX perspective, like what products really excite you. Do you want to work on more B2B products? Do you want to work on B2C products? Once you have that level of clarity, it actually helps to work backwards to know what kind of role excites you, and then build a portfolio to get that kind of a job, rather than I'm just going to go to LinkedIn and search all the jobs. I'm going to just apply. Like somebody told me a very funny analogy. One is you can be a machine gun or you can be a sniper. So if you're a machine gun, you have one portfolio, you just shoot it at all the jobs, or you can be a sniper and pick and choose which job role really you're going after, and then go after that target really well. So that's the first tip. The second one I have for you is practice basic hygiene. Again, it's just a reminder, if you don't do this already, make sure that you want to get your portfolio is your first impression of you to anybody looking at it, right? So you want to get your first impression correct. No grammatical errors. Make sure all your links work. Test it out with your friends and family internally before you start applying to jobs. Again, it's just a reminder if you're not already doing this. The third tip, I often see junior designers making this error of thinking I need to showcase every single process that I did in my case study, right? So instead, what you can focus on is the outcomes rather than the process. Now, not everyone, I acknowledge that you want to show the business impact of your work, and hopefully if you don't have a job, then maybe it's all fake case studies. How do you show impact then? You can still do some level of usability testing or some kind of metrics to measure whether what you started with and what you ended with made a difference. That's basically the story you need to tell with your case study. So that's what I mean here by prioritize outcomes over process. And then make sure to highlight your personality in your portfolio, not just your skills. Again, a very common mistake everyone does is spends time putting too many case studies in, but before the case study, you have to remember I'm hiring a person, right? The HR person, whoever's contacting you, is also evaluating whether you will be a good fit to the team culturally. So it's important to show your how well you play with others, whether it's on your LinkedIn recommendations or in your portfolio somewhere. Make sure to capture that. So highlight your personality and talk about other skills that you have, which show off your personality essentially. And then lastly, be honest about failures. I think, again, everyone tries to show a happy path in their portfolio, like everything is perfect. I designed something and all users loved it. Yeah, sure, that sounds ideal, but in reality, though, that's not what happens. I have often failed multiple times in a feature that we released. Maybe it doesn't have good adoption. I learned it the hard way that you assume something and then users, totally miss it. Maybe you thought you're designing a really kick-ass onboarding, but then the users felt, onboarding, who wants this? I just want to get to the screen to do the task, right? So things like that. Like, I think it adds some value to show how good are you at accepting failures and moving past those failures. So make sure you have some case studies that also talk about your failures just as much as your success. Yeah, that's the last tip for you. And with that, I have come to the end of my presentation. I hope you guys found that helpful.
Yes, so it was absolutely an insightful session. I'm pretty sure everyone here has, gained some sort of knowledge or some sort of clarity they were looking for. And also, like we have a Q&A session after this, wherein
Yeah.
I think everyone might have some questions, in terms to what they have learned here. Before that, I'll just take a couple of minutes where, I want to introduce something to our learners. Like there is an initiative that we have, taken something new that we want to introduce to our learners in aspects of, learning design and making it affordable at the same time. So I want to talk about ProSchool. What is ProSchool? Okay, so I'll just take a couple of minutes to make people understand what ProSchool actually is. Before that, yeah, perfect. I'm so sorry for the delay. Yeah, talking about ProSchool. So what is ProSchool? ProSchool is basically a UI UX design training school. Where we are helping designers getting trained, intern, and even work full time, with leading design agencies. Currently, we are offering a 6-month extensive UI UX design training program, wherein in the first 4 months, you will be learning from industry experts, mentors who have experience around 10 years into the domain. And then the next 2 months, you'll be working as an intern with one of India's leading design agency called ProCreator. This internship would be revolving around creating a base for your career into UI and UX. So this would be a full-time internship wherein it will enable you to have live and hands-on experience on projects that ProCreator would be working on. So this is something that would be pretty vital if you're looking to switch your career into UI UX, or you are looking forward to move into UI UX domain. So this is something that we have started as providing something to the community as well, because this is something that we want to keep very affordable and accessible for the aspiring designers. And yeah, so that is about ProSchool. I'll drop a link wherein you can register for ProSchool, and you'll be landing to a form where you can just register with simple details. And I'll also drop a link for Menaka's LinkedIn, so that you can reach out to her in case of any future concerns or questions or collaborations, anything of that sort. And yes, I'll also be dropping a YouTube link for our channel where you can view this interactive and informative session as well. So yeah, we can start with the Q&A session, I guess, Menaka. I am pretty sure that people might have various questions regarding to our today's topic. So we can definitely start with the Q&A session.
Yeah, I see someone's hand is raised. Do you want to ask your question, Dave?
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can just put it down in the Q&A session. Okay, so Aishwarya has a question. Hi, I am Aishwarya. I have completed UI UX course and my portfolio. I want to get in as a product designer. Should I do masters to get a better understanding and a better role, or should I start looking for a job? By the way, currently I work as a C developer. Okay.
Okay, my advice, if you want to get into product designing, build a product. Start with something concrete. I personally never done a degree in product design, right? I told you my background is graphic design. So I'm of the school of thought that learning happens when you build something. So whether it's a simple app or you mentioned you're already a developer. So if you have coding skills, and put that to use and build a simple product, and that can be a stepping stone towards getting into this industry as well. That's my advice. I hope I answered.
Yeah. So I guess we have one more question. Okay. Okay, I guess people can definitely put on their questions in the Q&A session. In the meantime, Menaka, even I'd like to know, like, I guess everyone here would love to understand something, a bit more apart from the session about you, like how your journey has been, throughout this domain, working through this domain, or like, is there anything specific that has, helped you in terms of thriving into your career? something
Sure.
vital, if you would have, would love to share with the audience?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I trained as a graphic designer and I moved to Singapore almost 10 years ago. I began my career there because I went there to study, and then after graduation, I tried looking for a job, and of course, it was the recession when I graduated. So I ended up coming back to India, practicing here as a graphic designer for about 2 to 3 years, working in small kind of startup-y jobs. And I would also multitask as a freelancer. So I think being, having a hustle on the side is super important for me, always. So, I'm right now also I work full time, but I'm very passionate about teaching and mentoring. So I do that as my side hustle, as I call it. So
Okay.
I believe every designer is creative, like you're a designer, hence you're creative.
That's it,
So
right? Yes.
so it's a given that you may be interested in more than one thing. What I would say is like explore, right? And early stage of the career is where you can take risks, you can jump jobs really quickly, and that's also another learning I have from my own career, that early stages, I didn't worry so much if I stayed in one job only for 2 years, 3 years. I think I was comfortable with um, a little bit of ambiguity, not knowing where my career was going initially, until I think there was a point in time where I felt, okay, I think I have transitioned from wanting to do purely visual design into doing something more big picture, think about the journey and the relationships between things, right? So that natural transition also led me to then question where my skills are. Do I have the right skill set? Because when you want to apply to a job, I think what you have to realize is they're actually not hiring you for the skills you have. They're hiring you for the skills that you can learn really fast. And they're hiring you for your mindset,
Yeah.
just as much as they hire you for the pure design skills. Everyone focuses so much on the craft, they forget about those soft skills, forget about the fact that you can learn things on the job. A job is not expecting you to be perfect from the get-go. And I encourage everyone to remember that you can't be perfect from the start. Your first few jobs, you will struggle, and even now I struggle. There are some things I've gotten really good at. I can spit out wireframes and do things really fast, but at the same time I struggle as being a design manager, making sure everyone, my team, feels heard, making sure their careers are progressing, right? That is a struggle for me. It's not a skill I have learned anywhere. So that's a personal struggle of growth for me in the company. So everyone at different stages will also face that skill gap, but evaluating yourself and knowing how to fill that gap is super important.
Right. So it's basically about understanding and enjoying the process. Everyone needs
Yes.
to understand, I guess. We have a couple of questions. So jumping onto the questions. Okay, Jagdish Kumar, he has a question. He says, I'm working in service-based company as UX designer. Here, I'm not able to practice all the processes like discovery, user interviews, or UX texting. So how can I build a solid UX portfolio?
Oh, very good question. I really like it. So I will say that it is hard to build a perfect portfolio. Honestly, even in my company, when I began and until now, I joined as a senior designer. Now I'm leading a small team. So to get here, I think we have to constantly prove the worth of doing certain processes, right? So research was not like a given from the start. So it took me and several other design team members to actually prove the ROI of research before the company started believing and investing in doing research more frequently. Now we are at a stage where we constantly have research panels. There's a lot of users we are inviting frequently, and to get here, the struggle was, how do you prove the ROI at the start? So I think if you worry about your portfolio and do this, it will not help you. But if you care about doing research, to actually learn something about the product you're building and improving your work, then I'd say you approach it with a little different mindset. Don't think about what I'm doing, can I put it in my portfolio? Instead, think about what I'm doing. Am I building a good product that people, it'll make a difference in somebody's life? That's what I advise. That because again, same story for me. When I began, I was of the same mindset. Will this look good in my portfolio? But I stopped thinking about the portfolio and instead started asking myself, like, I have the opportunity to work on a product where people can find a house, right? And finding a house such an emotional decision as much as it is a very big financial decision. So when I stopped thinking about the portfolio, started thinking about the bigger picture of things, it changed my perspective and then started to kind of fuel my passion in convincing people the importance of doing all these processes. Yeah, that I hope that answers, Jagdish.
So we also have a question from Yash Agarwal. He says that, hi, I'm Agarwal Yash. I just want to ask that the recruiters focus on our school and college result, or they only focus on our design skill?
I think I covered this, but let me repeat. So recruiters, what they're looking for is somebody who can, honestly, most recruiters don't get me wrong, but they don't know what they are supposed to be hiring for. Okay, so they go with the CV that has been given by the design manager. So they are a stepping stone, I would say, in the process of getting recruited. So I think on LinkedIn, right, what I found is helpful is to ensure you have your skills as in your description. So where you have that about me, put down all the skills, because the recruiters use LinkedIn recruiter tool, and in the tool they just type in keywords, and if the keyword matches something on your profile, that's when it shows up on their end, and then they contact you. So it's a game of chance, but to improve your chance, make sure that you put all the keywords related to the jobs you're looking for in your description, but in a meaningful way. Don't just dump keywords. For example, how I write it is I talk about on my own LinkedIn, if you check it out. So I write about who I am as a designer, what am I passionate about as a little intro, then talk about what are some skill sets I have today relevant to my job role and also relevant to the jobs I'm looking for in my skills. That helps. Yeah. So then to answer your question, will they look at, will they look at my portfolio or will they look at my skills, right? That was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, portfolio comes second in that order. First, they try to find you for your skills because that's the only sort of clue they have from the design manager trying to hire. And then, yeah, it depends. Like, I don't know how mature all recruiters are in all companies. Most companies, tech recruiters have a good understanding of skill sets. UX roles, though, I can't say I know too many great recruiters. That's the gap. I think tech skills are easier because they are very, knowledge heavy skills. Whereas for UX, how do you assess someone who can talk really well? How do you assess someone who can have good empathy for users? It's hard. I don't think it's easy for a recruiter to assess you like that as well. Yeah.
Great. So there's a question from Dev Jha. So Dev is asking, how can I improve my visual design skills?
Okay. This one is, okay, it's a combination of practice and it's a combination of making sure you look at the right places to learn from, right? For what I mean by that is, are you practicing Figma frequently, like to improve on the technique? So that I mentioned the craft, right? So that part, so making sure your understanding of Figma, how to build components, use the auto layout functions, blah, blah, blah. Don't want to get into Figma tutorial here, but essentially knowing Figma really well, because that's kind of the de facto tool now if you want to do UI design or visual design. That's one part. Another part is also understanding the history or the theory behind colors, typography, all the basic building blocks of what makes visual design important is, I'm sorry, what is important is to understand the building blocks. So typography, colors, a bit of psychology, like design psychology, read up on these topics. There are a lot of resources out there. I think there is this series of books called A Book Apart. If you just Google that, they have a lot of books on this topic. There's another one called UX Laws. Again, that's all on design psychology topic. And third one for visual design is, as I mentioned, understanding the guidelines or best practices for that particular platform that you're designing for. I think is super important. And if you don't know the guidelines, you don't know how to break the rules. That's what I say. Like if you want to build a Snapchat or you want to build an Instagram kind of experience, you need to know what's the best Apple experience, what's the best Android experience. Then you play with the boundaries a little and then know, okay, I can, it should be a bottom sheet. It shouldn't be a, I don't know, some other component, right? So how do you take those design decisions? Only if you know the medium really well. So before I study art, I should know what paints are, what the brush does. How do those tools work? You understand that, then you can paint a beautiful picture. You don't start with beautiful picture first. Yeah. I hope that answers.
Sounds good. So, okay, there's a question in the chat box as well. Okay, it's from Kunal. Kunal says, I'm a beginner in UX design. What do you think of future market demands, especially for UX designers?
Right now, I would say the skills of thinking cannot be replicated by AI. I know there's a lot of chat GPT, and you may have heard of this thing called Galileo. I believe it's in like a beta phase or something like that. People have just put it out there saying it's going to spit out UI based on a chat prompt. I think those things are like, again, AI tools can reproduce art or reproduce something, but someone has to think about the relationship between things. I don't think any AI tool or anything has come up. And if you go back to the slides that if I go back to the slides I shared earlier, the relationship between things, right? I think designers still need to focus on that interconnectivity part a lot more. That's where the game changers are in terms of experience. I think what makes Airbnb is like, they thought about the experience beyond the screen of searching. They thought about the guest experience. They thought about the host experience. You connect all these different systems together, then you're building a really super experience overall for all your customers. Yeah, I think that skill set is going to be still in demand any day from 2050 also. Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. So even after this insightful session, I guess we have time left for us. So even if there are more questions from your side, guys, like everyone in the audience, you can ask the questions in Q&A or in the chat. And until then, I have a question. Like I'm pretty curious about this. Menaka,
Sure.
what is your take on this upcoming technology, AI technology that we are, that is emerging in the market in every domain? We see AI is nowadays for everything. So what is your take on that? Like anything in specific you have a specific opinion in terms to that?
I think I'm excited to learn the possibilities. I see it as a chance to make our life simpler in some ways. I think AI is already doing that, right? Like it's been around, it's not new per se. It's just that the way of enabling AI in your day-to-day has gone on increasing. Like we went from personal assistant as a concept into like Siri and Alexa and things like that. That became a day-to-day. It is an AI function at the end of the day. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer. But it's still at a point where the user has to prompt it to do something. So what I'll be curious to see is how AI evolves to a point where it takes away the mundane jobs out of the way, like so that you can focus on doing important stuff. Like for example, like I don't know, repeated tasks that I keep doing, which I don't, really want to do as a designer. Can I just tell a AI chatbot to solve it for me? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but like there have been some good ideas that people are exploring. I believe in healthcare and other such what do you say, in domains where the like government websites. Oh my God. Imagine somebody cracked a really good AI tool to do all your government jobs.
Yeah, that's right. That would be something that would be actually very useful because
Yeah, exactly. So there's like a lot of businesses and stuff waiting to be disrupted. So I think that there is a very bright future for AI. It's just what is interesting to me is how will it become a technology that we'll all learn to adapt into our lives. Like I grew up in an era where there was no computers and suddenly there were computers. So I had to adapt. My kids are growing up with AI in their daily lives, right? They know how to use AI as a friend almost. So it's like, I'm curious, how will they grow up to, use it for their work, for example? It will
I
become
hope
commonplace.
that would be something, that would be a positive outcome for, because there are certain insecurities rolling around this
Oh,
as
there
yeah.
is always that some AI is going to take over my job. I don't think so. Like
Exactly.
everyone said that about a lot of different technologies, but everyone still has jobs. I mean, unless of course you're laid off. I'm sorry, but
I personally think that it can be a way to create more jobs as well. Because if it is a tool that is going to work on a mechanism, certain way of working, we are going to need people to, handle all the configurations, all the things for the tools and all that stuff. So it can be an opportunity as well. I guess it's
yeah.
about the perception. Yeah.
I would say as long as there are humans, you will always need other humans to make sense of the humans.
Yes. Collaboration of
If we
humans
all
is very
become
important.
machines, then that's a different story. Then we can live in the world of science fiction, perhaps.
Yes.
But as long as we're human, then I don't think AI or anything is going to replace humans that fast.
Let's hope to that. Okay, so we have a question. I don't have the name. It's an anonymous attendee.
Physical
Okay.
product design. I
Yes.
see that. I am not exactly sure what you are referring to. You mean like products you can hold in the hand? Like, what do you mean physical product design?
If you can elaborate your question into simple terms, please.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to understand what that is
Physical
referring to.
product design, I guess it has to be something that we use in our day-to-day lives, and about the design of that product, like a bottle, maybe a jar.
Okay.
Yes, it has to be that.
I can't say I know enough about that field to talk about it, but the little that I know, it is a field of UX called ergonomics, which refers to how things feel in your hand when you hold it. Possibly you can read up on that topic, but I believe it has more to do with understanding how the product needs to feel in your surrounding, in your hands, in your wherever the product is going to be used. And I think that's where it overlaps with digital product design, understanding the user's mindset, having empathy, all of that can be a very insightful learning for both physical and digital product designers. So a little story here from me is there was this workshop I attended in Singapore, hosted by the National Library of Singapore. They were trying to make their library experiences better for disabled people. So how did they do this workshop? They called designers over and they called a bunch of people who had a physical disability, and we were paired with one disabled person. So I was paired with someone who was autistic, but highly functioning autistic. So they were able to express themselves, but they still had all the disabilities that come with autism. So what was interesting and insightful for me is we walked through the same exact space, but the person was describing all the things that they felt by the lights. They were bothered by some patterns, colors. I wouldn't have thought twice about this, right? So it's a physical space, but the design choices that somebody makes impact somebody else in such a deep way. And I think that was super like important for me, that to experience it walking with somebody who had that disability, telling me like, lights, the particular type of lights can be like make a buzzing kind of a sensation, and that bothered them so much. And I was like, oh really? Okay, I had no idea. So that empathy, I think, comes when you are in the physical space. So it's just a story I thought of sharing because you were talking about physical products, and I think this ties back to that in a way. Yeah.
Great. So any more questions, guys? If you have anything to ask, we have like a few minutes left. Can do that.
Yeah, or if you feel like you want to chat with me and have some more advice, yeah, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, or I'm also on ADP list.
Okay.
I guess we all know about mentoring, so I'm just mentioning.
Yeah. So
Sorry if it crosses any wires.
Yes. Can you please help them with your LinkedIn link? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
You can just drop it in the chat box.
Yep.
Perfect.
Let me just find my own profile link, I guess. Okay, there we go. Putting it in the chat.
Perfect. So guys, now, like everyone has a link to Menaka's LinkedIn. You can reach out to her like for collaborations, for any concerns, or maybe any informative sessions you want, anything like that in terms of design. And you'll also have the link for Pro School in the chat box as we discussed, and also the YouTube channel link for this interactive session. So I guess there have been questions and there have been answers. Okay, there is one more question now.
Okay.
Types of digital product to sell in UX and UI.
Not sure exactly what I can answer there. You can sell a lot of different types of products. It depends on like the industry. Like for example, I gave the example earlier about insurance. I believe some parts of that journey can be digitized, so you can find the different packages and book your insurance online. So that's one example. There's healthcare, there's so many. Food, we are surrounded by digital products, I think, on a daily basis, especially in India. Every 5 minutes there's a new app, I feel, that's advertised or released. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that's what you are asking about.
Perfect. I guess everyone's concerns and doubts have been cleared, and now you have Menaka's LinkedIn as well, so you can reach out to her. And I guess we can wrap up the session for today. It has been a wonderful session, Menaka. I would personally like to thank you, and also on behalf of ProApp and everyone who was here. This has been interactive, insightful, and informative in various ways. Everyone had their concerns addressed as well, very well from your side. So I guess that sums up. Okay, not yet. We have one more question from Abdullahi Muhammad. Okay, ma'am, please, I'm having issue on job. I finished senior graphic design, but no job since 2021. Okay, I think.
Not sure how I can help there.
Exactly.
I think I shared a lot of tips in the call. In the session earlier. Maybe you can rewatch this video and refer back to what I had mentioned. Essentially, make sure you're applying to the right kind of jobs and making sure that you're showcasing your work well as well. Like, remember I said, make sure your portfolio hygiene is maintained, no grammar errors and all that stuff. Maybe, evaluate if you've got the right level of polish for a portfolio. You start there, and then try and see why you're not getting a job, because I don't believe that there are no jobs out there. There are. It's just maybe your skill level is not at par with what is in demand, right? So it's good for you to reflect on your own skills. Yeah.
Perfect. And we wish you luck for finding a good.
Yeah, all the best.
Yeah, all the best. So I guess we can wrap up this session for today, Menaka. And as I told you, it was a great session. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the valuable inputs. So I guess, that's it for today.
All
Thank
right.
you
Thanks,
everyone for
everyone.
joining us. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.